Good morning, everyone. Just welcome to this session on the entire national logistics policy and ULIP. Well, people do get confused what ULIP is all about, and I think most of the people think that is a unit-linked insurance plan. It's nothing to do with investment, guys. It's called the Unified Logistics Interface Program, which the government has started. Just to give you some perspective about the logistics industry in India, currently the industry is growing at about a good 7 to 8% CAGR and employs more than 22 million people across India. Now, if I go by statistics, this industry is going to need another 1.5 million people in the next 1 year itself. So the potential is huge. If I look at it more from a perspective that how India is at par with some of our global peers, I think if there's a very good index which the government uses, which is the World Bank that uses, called the Logistics Performance Index. Now, as of now, India stands at 38th position out of the 139 countries, but the vision is definitely to be in the top 25 by 2030. So, with that overall objective, government has actually floated a national logistics policy and a ULIP interface to make sure that the process is more robust and we move up the value chain as well. Now, if I look at it more from an industry perspective, if I look at the cost of transportation that the country has, it's approximately 14% of the GDP. I map it to some of the advanced countries. I think they are hovering around 8% of the GDP. So we still have a distance to cover from an efficiency of our logistics perspective. Just to give you benchmarks, how does that impact our business? The industry has lost about $180 billion from that perspective of being a bit higher on the cost side because of our higher logistics cost. And if I go as per estimates, if this project or this cost of logistics was not taken up immediately, the impact would be about $500 billion by 2030. So it is very critical from an overall business perspective, from an industry perspective, to make sure that our logistics cost comes down. And we have a skew. 65% of our logistics is still on the road side. Railways account for 31%, and though we have the biggest shoreline in India, our waterways is only 3%. So I think there is a lot of potential that the industry has in terms of downsizing the cost of transportation as well. If I look at it from a digital technology perspective, I think we still have some distance to cover. Just to give you some benchmark, if I look at the robotics industry, which we see many companies using from automation of warehouse or making the efficient warehouses, it's still at about, it's growing at a CAGR of 30%. Another aspect from technology is something to do with the entire blockchain, which will just help you to cover and track your entire value chain of your shipment. That industry is growing at about 70 odd percent. And if I look at the latest technology, which is drone, which is used for delivery in some of the developed countries, that industry is at about $21 billion. So whilst we are aspiring to bring down our logistics cost, I think the other developed countries are moving one step ahead of us in terms of using more technology, more data to bring down the logistics cost as well. And that's where the entire unified logistics interface program has been launched by government. If you look at it, it's a very terrific combination of if I look at the Gati Shakti program, where government has made an outlay of about 100 lakh crores for developing the infrastructure. So that's where the harder part of the business comes in. If I look at the softer part of the business, you see a lot of government initiatives like ULIPs, you'll see e-logs, you see a greenhouse emission calculators, where the government is actually supporting the technology infrastructure as well. Broadly, the objective of ULIP has been very clear. One is in terms of getting more efficiency using the multimodal transports that we have. So second is looking at more automation, processes, digitization, and how do we reduce the paperwork as well. The third is in terms, and which is the most critical, is the entire data that can be generated from the system. How can we harness data to bring down the cost of logistics and be more efficient in our logistics planning? And obviously, another vision is in terms of how ULIP can integrate with the company's WMS and the TMS to get more data insights as well. But the thought is very clear that how do we use technology, how we harness the data that's coming to us in terms of efficient route planning, bringing down the cost of logistics, as well as making sure that there is no wastage in the process. Uh, if I look at it, about 400 companies have already registered with ULIP, and 68 companies have actually signed in NDA as well. In a short span of time, there are about 65 million transactions that have got processed on ULIP. So there is data that's available. We just need to make sure that how we harness that data as well. Now, the way I said, if I look at the harder aspects of the infrastructure, we definitely see improvements happening on the ground. Just to give a data point, the average turnaround time for the ships which were lying, which are there for delivering cargo at the Indian ports, has actually reduced by 18 hours. You have got 40 airports, air cargo terminals that have come up. There is another 35 air cargo terminals which have got cold storage facilities as well. And if I look at it, some of the national planning group which is there at the Gati Shakti, they are actually parallelly evaluating projects nearly worth about 6 lakh crores. So there is a defined intent from the government in terms of making sure that how data can be used, how an AI ML can be used for reducing the cost of logistics, also supporting it with the hardware, which is all the infrastructure, ports, airports, roads as well. While these numbers may look more statistics, but I think definitely there is a very positive movement that's happening from an overall perspective where government is very much keen to make sure that you have the hardware as well as the software to make sure that the cost of logistics is brought down and it's more efficient as well. While all these initiatives have got taken in September 2022, and they are still young, I would say, to evaluate the results, but we definitely see a positive side coming up from an overall logistics sector perspective. So with that background, I think the way we have Raj and we have Varun as well. Raj comes with a heavy domain from a business perspective, and Varun has been working proactively with various government agencies as well in terms of how industry can have more alignment with the government agencies as well. But the thought for today's discussion is in terms of how we can leverage a hardcore business experience as well as corporate affairs experience to make sure that we have full understanding of NPL and ULIP as well. So with that, Raj, I'll pose the first question to you is in terms of if I look at it more from a sector perspective, nearly 90% of the sector is more in an unorganized sector, wherein people have less than 5 trucks. Now, for them to get digital aligned, it's going to be a kind of a vision, and it's going to be requiring some level of investments as well. So I think if I look at it more from a business perspective, what challenges you foresee in getting this wider mass aligned with ULIP as well as some of the other initiatives that the government is taking?
Sure. Thank you, Naveen, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for being there. So first is, on this sector, it's technically not unorganized any more than 90%. It's the same in US as well as in China. Why I say? Because everybody is on GST portal. Moment you're on GST means your data is available for everyone to have a look and utilize the data. So the sector is fragmented with small ownership. But let's look at the positive side. The mandate is that can we make ULIP a UPI? That's what we all are working towards. And I believe the industry, the associations all are looking forward to it. So to give you some data points, when we run our network, ULIP, you get multiple APIs for the house who would be aware and may not be aware. One is you get the vehicle verification done in terms of a API, whether the vehicle is fit, whether the vehicle has got the right financial approvals, and which stage, that is the engine, whether it is Euro stage 3, 4, 5, not 5, but Euro stage 3, 4 and 6, whether which engine it is, when was the vehicle made, which means the OEM, when did they make that, API comes into a system. You can verify the PAN card of the guy who's giving the truck, that is the owner. You can verify the driver details, that is the driver license, validity, whether he is verified for carrying what you call as heavy duty goods or chemicals, that is dangerous goods. That API comes in. You get an API from FOIS, which is the railway system. So you can track your cargo on the rail network using ULIP API. You can also track what you call as container tracking through a portal or API called as LDB, which is the logistics database bank, where the containers are tagged through RFID. So NLDS or NICDC is doing that. So whenever a container comes into the country, RFID is put, and across major gateways, that is ports, railway terminals, inland container depots, the container gets tracked and you get that data into your system. So if you see clearly, the entire network can be mapped, and that data, of course, is FASTag. That data helps you to actually create a route, actually monitor the costs, and look at inefficiencies. On an average, we as a company are looking at 3.5 lakh FASTag transactions a month, over 10,000 Vahan data points, and over 45,000 container data points into our system. And the power is that you make less errors, you are able to service your customer better. So what I would advise on the house to is accept this, adopt this. Yes, there is a cost arbitrage, but more adoption will bring the cost down. It's pretty much like UPI. So what we would encourage is the way UPI has been adopted, ULIP has the same future, and associations like ITWA and AMITC are taking the lead. They are bringing in more and more people on board. So I see only the positive side on the ULIP adoption and the cost also to come down. So this is to answer your first question.
Sure. Thanks, sir. Also if I look at it, just digressing from a bit of a digital perspective, but if I look at it more from a sector perspective, and obviously one of the main objective of NLP was how do we make the sector more ESG compliant. If I look at a current way, nearly 14% of our greenhouse emissions are coming from the sector per se. If I look at it more from a perspective of the electronic vehicles, I think that's more being used towards the last mile delivery per se. And then obviously we still have some distance to cover from adoption of some of the more efficient electronic vehicle using from a trucking perspective. But going with our vision of totally carbon neutral by 2070, I think what are the other areas, because government has been a main objective on NLP is reducing our greenhouse emissions. So what do you think the industry can do more from reducing those greenhouse emissions as well?
Sure. Thanks, Naveen. So again, whenever you look at any new area like ESG, we can adopt it as long as it is free. As they say, in India, we want everything which has got free or discounted. So that's what we also would like to have. But having said that, to give you some statistics, the catch is not with the logistics and transport industry. The catch is on the supply side. You don't have a heavy duty truck which is yet approved to run on Indian roads as far as electric vehicle is concerned. The maximum what's now in the market is a 2.2 ton vehicle, and ARI, which is the apex body to approve a vehicle as per norms to run on Indian roads, which is under CMVR, is only 2.2 tons. So if you say we have to use long haul, which is the maximum polluting, sort of a sector, then the vehicle has to be there. If there's no vehicle, how will I use it? So it's a chicken and egg story. So that's the biggest getting point. You would have heard that people are using CNG, you would have heard people are using LNG. The problem is these vehicles cost compared to a diesel truck is 2 times to 3 times, and an electric vehicle is as good as 3.5 to 4 times. Now would the user pay for it? We just had the Uber CEO coming into India and he said, in India everything has to be free, or we want, we don't want to pay. It's the same in the industry. Why will a user pay for a capex which is 2 times or 3 times? So thus the total cost of ownership on a CNG vehicle or a LNG vehicle, though they are coming in, is the challenge. It is around, our calculation is around 18-20% higher compared to a diesel vehicle. So please don't get misguided. Diesel vehicles will stay. It will take time, so it might be a decade for us to transition to alternate fuels. But what will happen in diesel vehicles, the OEMs are bringing in better technology with something like 6, Euro stage 6 or Euro stage 6.2, where the carbon dioxide, the sulfur, the nitrogen, the emissions are already low by 40 to 50%. So the diesel engine itself is becoming powerful. You already know of octane in terms of the fuel supply. That quality is increasing. So the diesel engines are not there to die, so we'll all coexist. So as an industry, we are ready to adopt. Pilots are happening, and today an LNG vehicles are being plied, but they are plied in very select routes. So this is what we see. It's a journey. It will take time, but somebody will have to bell the cat by saying, I'm going to invest and I'm going to fund it. Else the small time operator will not be able to fund 2 or 3 times the cost. So this is what the take is. But ESG is there to stay, and we're all looking at it.
Sure, thanks. So, Varun, if I just ask in terms of you have been interacting with multiple stakeholders as well, how do you think the industry has benefited from an overall ULIP implementation perspective as well? Considering your experience of dealing with multiple government agencies as well. So, what's your view in terms of what has been the overall benefit of ULIP to the industry per se?
Thank you so much, Naveen. Good morning, everybody. It's a very pertinent question, but before that, I think I'll spend some time on just laying a bit about the national logistics policy. See, the national logistics policy, as we all know, was launched in 2022, and it was launched in the month of September, and was launched on 17th September. And 17th September happens to be, the birthday of our Honorable Prime Minister. So why I'm putting this point in front of this August audience is, institutionally, right at the top, there is a very big focus on, improving the cost of, logistics and the allied industry. Now, coming to the fundamental of it, for any policy initiative or for any initiative of the government to be successful, there has to be an enabling role by the relevant government agency, as well as institutional framework to be built. Now, let's dive deeper into the ULIP aspect of it. There are multiple ministries which were sitting on multiple data banks, which have been very, very useful for the industry. But for the industry, historically, to really get access to those data points and the information would have been very, very challenging, right? Hence, what the government of India did was, to create an institutional structure which was separated from the core line ministry, which is DPIT, Department of Logistics, and ULIP was created. And they created a very, very simple mechanism where industry can, just approach the nodal agency with their requirement, and there's a complete team of facilitation which would really help the industry to, access relevant databases of ministries.
Sure. So one more thing, Varun, that I would like to cover is, typically if I look at it more from a logistics perspective in India, a truck will pass through multiple states, If I look at a leads data, which is just evaluating each and every state in terms of how good is their infrastructure, how good is the technology that they use. Each state is on a different wavelength as of now. And typically there has always been a concern from the industry that how do I get to the right department, to make sure that that process is much more streamlined, So how do you think this entire e-log concept that the government has brought in is adding value to the industry?
Thanks. So e-log is very simple. E-log stands for ease of logistics. And what government has done, and I think they very well understand, as Raj rightly said, industry is not disorganized, it's fragmented, correct? Now to bring various stakeholders in this fragmented industry on one pool, it would be very, very difficult, for an individual stakeholder, owner of 5 trucks or owner of 10 trucks to, really engage or really have that kind of bandwidth to really engage with the relevant stakeholders in the government. So hence, the e-log came into picture where the relevant associations, happy to share, I think, just slightly debating topic. IMAI is also one of the important, member of e-logs, where these stakeholders, there can be one, there can be many, can go to an association, highlight the common issues and challenges, association as one common nodal point, articulates and put forward into an institutional mechanism called e-logs. Once the information or the issues and challenges are put into the e-logs, as I said earlier, to make any policy successful, there has to be an enabling role from the government and a relevant institutional mechanism into place. Once that request is placed in the e-logs portal, the line ministry or the central ministry from the central government, which is Department of Logistics under DPIIT, takes it up, and they further coordinate with different arms of the government to solve those issues and challenges.
Sure, thanks. So Raj, just looking at coming back to you in terms of you have been an organization which is more than 65 years old. From a traditional logistics player to a front-end logistics player which is using digital technologies to its core. How did you manage this transition? Because that's where the industry has to look forward to. What were your processes? What were your thoughts in making a digital transformation at TCI itself?
Sure, thanks. So one aspect is that we live in an era of technology, we're all aware, and we cannot do without that. But for us always, any tech is an enabler to service a customer need. So you need to be practical about it. There's a huge wave of startups. Varun is here, I'm sorry, but you cannot miss the point that ultimately it is roti, kapda or makan. Though you are saying that Wi-Fi has come, we all live in an era, but you still need to consume roti, kapda, makan, which is still physical. Till the planet Earth remains, these four will be physical. So you can't say I am going to do digital out of that. With that fundamental, the adoption of tech is to enable a service need to ensure that your entire experience is far better and your cost remains low. We know for sure there are customers, just to let you know, and you'll be surprised, that the route between India to Sri Lanka is less than 2 days. India to Dubai is only 3 days. The document, when you export, might take 7 days to reach to the other bank and the guy to take the documents to clear the cargo. There are requirements that can I have the ship to go, for 10 or 14 days and then reach Dubai or Colombo. We are still living in that era. So you say that tech enables speed? No. Tech enables ease of use. And as a company, we have always adopted tech as an enabler, and that's the reason TCS is still in the forefront, that we have seen the customer need and use tech accordingly and build processes which becomes easy. As I said, ULIP is one process. Control towers for our customers, where you can see the entire data across the flow, reducing the cost for the customer, bringing in any improvement is how we use tech. And I believe we all need to understand the difference between an enabler and the business itself. So this is of course a big debate, but I leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks. Varun, just to come to you in terms of the way I said, the industry still needs about 1.5 million people in the next 1 year. Any thoughts in terms of how do we improve the digital literacy of the people in the sector? More so from a perspective that, on the ground level, you won't get the best of the talent, So any thoughts in terms of how do we improve this manpower requirement that is going to hit the industry very soon? And you come from a startup where tech is the way to go. So any thoughts in terms of how that can be done from?
No, absolutely. And again, I'm a firm believer of, having a right institutional mechanism in place. And I think I might have repeated this word 4 times, the reason behind that. I think logistic, as other industry goes, say for example, e-commerce industry today is around 80 billion, and it's bound to reach around $400 billion by 2030. And logistics, we all know that, right, would be a backbone of that. And to really enable those millions and billions of deliveries, we need the right set of people with the right set of skill set at the right timing. So coming back to the point on institutional structure, there is an agency in the government called Logistics Skill Development Council. Now, they have been doing phenomenal work in this thing. They have curriculum ready. They have been working with a lot of, industry as a whole. But the idea is that, it's not only 1 or 2 industries who can benefit from this. We as an industry association at IMI or industry directly, if they engage with, Logistics Skill Development Council, a lot of those work which has already been done would not have to be repeated. And hence, taking it to every nook and corner through anchoring through an institution would be far more easier and faster.
Sure. Thanks, Varun. Raj, just coming back to you, one of the key fundamentals of national logistics policy was to be in top 25 by 2030. Whilst we see a lot of initiatives being taken by the government, but any 2, 3 points that you think that can help us to accelerate this journey of moving up the ladder on a logistics performance index as well?
We did talk about technology, so I'll not mention that again. But most important is adoption of multimodal mode, whether it is a rail or a coastal shipping. That's critical, because just to let you know, when you use rail, you save nearly 60 to 70% carbon emission on an average when you take a 1,000-kilometer beat. So very important that we move more to rail, coastal and inland waterways. That will solve not only the cost aspect, will be more competitive in our exports, but also reduce carbon emissions. So I have a single point, not 3 points. Let's move multimodal. Thank you.
Sure. And in terms of like you have been dealing with multiple businesses, you have multimodal things. Do you see a gradual reduction in the road transport and increase in some of the other multi-modes as well? Because obviously infrastructure still has to get built up. Traditionally India has always been more of a road logistics country. But do you see logistics getting built up, considering that we have the biggest shoreline that is still not exploited?
Actually, it's a difficult piece, because what has happened is that since the road network has become so well, just to let you know, Delhi-Bangalore, previously it was on an average 7 days to reach Delhi-Bangalore. Today, you reach Delhi-Bangalore or Delhi-Madurai in 44 to 60 hours. It has changed because of this sheer speed at which roads are being built. So in turn, what has happened, people who are using air, people who are using other modes feel that road is still efficient, especially the e-commerce industry. But having said that, government has initiated that you as a private player can own your wagons. So there are multiple schemes. There are schemes such as Own Your Wagon scheme. There is a scheme called as Automobile Freight Train Operator. You have schemes which is called as Special Freight Train Operator. That enables you to own the train part barring the engine, which is called as a power. That's a big move. So we ourselves in TCI own 3 trains, and we use these trains for carrying automobiles. We are the largest private carrier of automobiles on Indian Railway network. So this ensures that when you are moving the cargoes, how do you move it by rail and save? But in terms of percentage, as the GDP grows, you are going to see that the share is going to be more or less the same. You're not going to see that the road is going to fall down. So it's going to be a while before rail and coastal picks up in absolute terms. So it's going to take a time. That's what our take is. It might take a decade or so to reach some levels for rail and coastal.
And just to add to Raj's point, in terms of government support and government enablement, this is one of the biggest agenda, right? And why I'm saying that 2 initiatives I want to really point out over here, right? For larger adoption of the railway network, the Ministry of Railways and the Department of Posts, which is the Ministry of Communications, have come out with a joint product called JPP, right? JPP is very simple. The first mile and the last mile is taken care by, Department of Posts, which is India Post, and the middle mile is taken care by Indian Railways.
Sure. And then one last question to you, Varun, is in terms of we see multiple states at different levels in their leads rating. Any thoughts in terms how the central government can help in terms of getting all this state at a much more higher level, considering we have a investment that's coming up and logistics is the backbone. So any thoughts in terms of how the centrals can get aligned, states also can get aligned with this entire leads process?
As we all know that the ranking of the lead survey was just published in December 2023. And I think this is the first of its kind in India. And the core objective is not to tell which state is better, just not only to point which state is better, which is not. The idea is that, there are good case studies, there are good benchmarking, or there are good practices which are available in one state, which other state can definitely follow. Coming back to Naveen's question is very important. Today, the central government, within the ministry itself, acting as a nodal point, engaging very, very closely with, all the state governments. End of the day, we have a federal structure, states and center have to come together to make any policy initiative really, really successful on the ground. And having said that, if I'm not mistaken, majority of state governments have built an institutional structure, and it all starts with having a framework, which is called the policy. We definitely see, I think most of the state governments have a state logistic policy in place.
Sure, thanks. So I think we did get valuable insights both from Varun and Raj, from a business perspective, from a industry perspective. I think we still have about 1 minute left. I would open the forum for any specific questions or any specific concerns that you would have from a panelist perspective. Anything specifically that you would like to understand more from a business perspective, or from obviously Varun's interaction with multiple government agencies as well? Sure, I think.
Hey, morning to all. Just want to understand for a startup founder how this framework can be useful. Because for me, I do commerce in rural business, and it's really painstaking for logistics, we can all understand, and cost itself. The local transport is much more cheaper. It gets me like the 30% less compared to all the big players. So how come some of these policies can benefit startups like me?
Varun, you want to take it?
So can we slightly deep dive into exactly, just hypothetically, can
What you said was right. When you look at the last mile and let's say tier 2, tier 3 cities, the local player is always going to be efficient because his cost of operation is going to be lesser compared to national players like us. That is very true. How this data helps is that it gives you a visibility and authenticity in terms of whether whatever you are carrying, is it safe. So as you scale up is where when you're going to face this. That today what happens when you are at a particular level, you are managing because it is visible to you in a particular way which you have created a process. But suppose you imagine you are plying 5,000 trucks carrying 20 tons each per day, and you are servicing all the major districts. 690 odd districts are there in India. Just visualize them. Then ULIP data, because at every step there is a authentication, whether Vahan, Sarthi, PAN, TAN, you name it, I don't wish to go technical, but you do, you are sure that you are going to cover yourself in terms of the risk. So the technology enables visibility, technology minimizes risk. And I believe those two are the biggest pillars in adoption of ULIP. But yes, the cost at local level is going to be less. So what as a startup you can do, you can have that player to be onboarded on ULIP on the ERP you create. So think that way, that you have created the ecosystem and all the small guys are onboarded and that ULIP API is going seamlessly. And this is how we are doing. So any large player will have to onboard the small guys and make it uniform. So this is how the play is happening. It's a long way, but it's a definite path to ensure that everybody has a skin in the game.
Sure. I think the panelists are still around. Feel free to ask them any additional questions. I think we already have the next panel waiting for their time, and we don't want to eat it up that. But all of us are around. Feel free to reach out to any one of us in terms of any additional concerns or questions that you may have.